Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. We are supported by Proper Design Works. For all your custom clothing and embroidery needs, look no further than Proper Design Works. They've got two incredible aspects to their business. It's two things that they do really well. They do big orders for all sorts of different ideas and situations and requirements of incredibly cool clothing, t-shirts, hats, patches, hoodies, sweatshirts. If you have a logo, an idea, a brand, a saying, something you want to get on a piece of clothing that expresses yourself for multiple different reasons. Why can't I talk today? Multiple different reasons. I go head right now at Proper Design Works on Instagram. You'll know what I'm talking about. For example, are you a new business and you want to get your logo onto your t-shirt to do some free advertising? Everybody looks sharp. Everybody sees your logo. Two birds, one t-shirt. Boom, done, right? Are you a sports team and you need a new jersey? You need a new beer chugging shirt. These are things that Proper Design Works can help you out with because they can do big orders. They can do like the whole league, right? Or they can do like 2 or 3 of the teams, or they can do your team, right? Like 100 t-shirts, 50 patches. These things are not foreign to the guys at Proper Design Works. They're mad geniuses with sewing machines. That's really what's going on there. The second aspect of the business is the custom clothing side. If you've never had someone design something for you, it is a lot of fun. You get to play jazz, right? You get to make shit up with whatever clothing design you've got going on in your head. And you get somebody who wants to make you happy because they want to see you wear it. Bespoke tailored pair of jeans that fit your frame perfectly, a hoodie with a couple weird zippers and some weird accoutrement. You know, if whatever you're thinking of and you're not really confident with a sewing machine, you can get a tailor. There's a place in the city that will make you custom clothing and you won't look like 50 other people, right? That's pretty cool. So whether you need a lot of things or a few things, head to at Proper Design Works on Instagram to know what I'm talking about. And then when you're ready to order, it's info@properdesignworks.com. Again, that is info@properdesignworks.com to place your first order. Second, we are supported by Bodegos, a global food eatery in the heart of the Exchange District in our hometown here of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Bodegos, in short, is like a global food eatery. It's a great, fun-looking, awesome open kitchen environment, right? But they offer different foods from different parts of the world. So you can get like your pitas, your flatbread pizzas, soups and salads from different pockets of the world, stir fries, like old school fish and chips. They've got a lot to offer, and it's all locally sourced, and it's really healthy too. It's made with fresh ingredients, nothing packaged and shipped from halfway around the world, and who knows what's inside of that thing after it's all said and done. Locally sourced, locally raised, Manitoba product is Bodegos. They are from here. They're not a chain. Nothing wrong with a chain, but we love small businesses in this province, and right now we need to support them. So next time you're downtown, you're perusing around, you're adventuring out after having done hopefully all the things we can do to prevent another crazy outbreak of COVID. Go to Bodegos, have a night out, have a great meal, go check out some of the live entertainment in the area, go have a drink somewhere else, but go to Bodegos first. 211 Bannatyne, in the heart of the Exchange District in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So that's for anybody traveling through too. You want to order like into your hotel room or something. Bodegos, skip the dishes. They're there. But go see them. Like, go for a walk. Get out. Stretch your legs. So, a couple announcements before we kick into the show. September 14th and 28th, we are in the lobby of the Park Theater for their cult movie night with Corey and Ninja Cat Productions. If you see an open mic at our table, that means come on over and express your opinion about the movie. We would love to hear your interpretation and your ideas of what we're watching. Cemetery Man is on the 14th. And the 80s animation classic Transformers, the movie, is on the 28th. That one we're all stupid excited for. There's a lot of people that we know that are coming. So, like I said, if you see an open mic, that means come on over, say hello, talk to us about movies, right? That's what we're there for. So that's that. This week on the show, I got lucky. Sean Garrity, Winnipeg writer-director of some fantastic films, Inertia, Lucid, My Awkward Sexual Adventure, Borealis, and his new one, I propose we never see each other again after tonight. It is a ode to Winnipeg and all things we are. Brief synopsis. It's a rom-com. I call it a love story. He calls it a rom-com. But it is a truly classic love story between a Filipino girl and a Mennonite boy in a town called Winnipeg. It's still going for another week. So if you can get to the movie theater, if you're capable of going to the movie theater, support a local film made by a local film person. This is part of our Making Movies with Manitoban series. Kind of trying to flip things up for you guys so it's not the same thing all the time. Little debate here, little interview there. So that is who is on the show. We got to talk about him getting into film and how it all started. He's traveled the world, and he's got a great way of telling really truthful stories that hit you in the heart. I was crying. I was laughing. Again, I implore you, please go see I Propose. We never see each other again after tonight. It is at Northgate Cinema and Cinemaplex on McGillivray, I believe. Yeah. Okay. That's it. That's all the adult stuff. That's all the stuff we have to do. Now we get to let you listen, and I'll shut the fuck up. So, like I always say, I'll give you the reel, and you enjoy the show. Manitoba filmmaker Sean Garrity.
How are you? It's good.
So I figure with everything that we do, we always like to start at the beginning. So, born and raised in Winnipeg, or are you an outsider?
No, I was born here, but we moved around quite a bit. I lived in a whole bunch of places. Lived up in the Northwest Territories, and I actually lived in a town for one's formative years, like grade 1 to grade 4, when, the world takes on a kind of a mythology that you carry with you for the rest of your days.
Yes.
I was living in a little town that no longer exists. It was sort of 4 kilometers away from Rivers, Manitoba.
Okay.
And it was an experimental town.
In what sense?
Well, it had been an Air Force base.
Oh.
Back in the Second World War, where they trained pilots. Especially pilots using, gliders as opposed to airplanes.
Interesting.
And so it was like that military style house that used to be over here at Kenaston and Grant.
Okay, I know the one. Yeah.
Right? The whole town was like that. After the war, they shut it down. And in the 1970s, Pierre Trudeau told his then Minister of Indian and Northern Affairs, Jean Chrétien, to set up a project that would take Aboriginals who were leaving reserve and ending up in the city and ending up running into trouble because of lack of skills and experience. And
there was a program like that at one point?
There was this program where they would come to this town, this experimental town, and the town had a couple of factories set up, Edson trailers and Sakini bikes.
Wow.
And so Aboriginals coming off reserve would get work at these factories to get job skills and job experience that they could then take into the city. And the idea was that they would land here for a couple years and that the factories would eventually work them up to management positions. And eventually these would be factories that were entirely run by Aboriginals who could then go to the city and be like, yeah, I did this job, I did this job, I did this job, I was a manager, and I'm ready to work. If that's what's something that
Sean,
they were
I
interested
shit you not, I have said this time and time again in conversations about how to fix problems in Canada, and was like, this would be a great idea. This is mind-blowing to me that this actually existed.
Yes, well, now you'll then quake in your boots to hear the tragic end of the story.
Of course.
Which is that the town was run by a guy who was the kind of point person for the federal government. Eventually, the factories sort of came to him and they worked out a deal where they said, listen, the government is paying the wages of these Aboriginals for like the first 6 months, and then we're expected to pick up the slack. We don't want to pay anything.
Of course.
So we're not going to work them up to management positions, and we're not going to pay for any of their training, and we're going to try and convince them after 6 months that they should sort of move on, and we want you to keep mum about that. One assumes some money changed hands in order for that to happen.
Envelopes of cash.
Right. And after a couple of years, when nobody was working their way up to a management position and no one was sticking around for longer than 6 months, scandal erupted and the press moved in and it was a giant, and the whole town just shut down in scandal and sadness. I went back. My wife was, of course, very interested in the story of this experimental town. So I took her back a little while ago. We did a Manitoba road trip. It's now a llama farm operated by a guy with an Australian accent.
That's awesome.
Yeah, most of the houses are gone.
Somewhat happy ending. Llamas, Australians.
That's happy for the llamas.
Yeah.
Because they're those military houses as well, they would just pick them up
and move them.
Yeah, put them on the back of a truck and move them, leaving the basements behind. So we parked my car at my old basement, and we were careful not to fall in. And walked,
That's awesome.
Walked around this town of kind of upside down houses, right? All these basements
so
and
weird.
Driveways. Yeah, it was very freaky.
Where is Rivers roughly located? Is it?
It's sort of half an hour northwest of Brandon.
Okay. All right. So literally in the middle of some nowhere area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty
okay.
much.
All right.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
Yeah. Then I came here, here being Winnipeg, and I grew up in the People's Republic of Charleswood, and I went to St. Paul's eventually,
Sure,
as one does, and then I was really interested. I think, like a lot of Winnipeggers are at 18, I was interested in just flying out of this place.
Yeah,
like I wanted to, at the time especially, you turn on the TV, you go see movies, and you listen to music, and it's like everything that happens in the world happens not here.
Yeah.
Somewhere that's not here.
We're watching it go by.
Yeah. I'm watching the world, and I see Winnipeg reflected precisely nowhere. And so yeah, I turned 18, man. I packed my things and I went to live in India for a year.
Oh, hello, Steve Jobs.
Did he do that as well?
You
Steve
did
Jobs?
that as well? Yeah.
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 I lived in India for a year.
I
and
feel it's the place where a lot of people go. There's a lot of religion. There's a lot of spirituality. It's a place to, the eat, pray, love, find your life, do that thing. And I think that's awesome. I missed that. So
it was fantastic. I feel like India is a place, if you can generalize a whole billion people, I mean, it feels like a place where everything is turned up to 11.
Really?
Yeah, you remember that joke from the right?
But this one goes to 11.
This one goes to 11.
Yeah.
That for me, that was India. Like the colors and the music and the people and the food and everything's just up to 11, right? Like it's like everything has so much flavor and the music is everywhere and it's so awesome and everything's so colorful and it's just, and you go into a street and it's clogged with traffic and people.
Does it look like a Wes Anderson movie? Like, does it look like Darjeeling Limited at
Oh my
all?
God,
Like,
no.
Is that so? That's a ripoff of it. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
no, it seems to the outsider, which is where I kind of remained for my year in India. To the outsider, it just seems like chaos, and yet it works.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to feel like you really don't understand anything about the world, India is a good place to start.
Mother of civilization and all internal knowledge. Okay, cool. What did you do there? You just mucked around, traveled?
Yeah, I was an exchange student, so
Okay.
they put me in school. I had to wear a little uniform, and I was in school. And I sat down with the principal when I first arrived, and she said, "Okay, so here we have 3 streams. We have the science stream, and we have the economics stream, and we have the arts stream." And I was just putting up my hand for my stream, and she said, "Except that no one wants to study the arts, so we don't offer the art stream here." So
That's a ripoff.
so you can choose between economics and science. And I guess she saw it in my face. She was like, "If neither of those suit you, you should go for economics. It's easier."
How is economics easier than science? At least has some, backbone and civilization, where economics is numbers.
Yeah, I guess, there was just no way I could compete with a bunch of kids from India in grade 12 at science.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. You're a little out of you're out of your element, Tony.
So yeah, I wouldn't have been ready for that. So I went into the economics stream at St. Joseph's High School in a place called Valsad in Gujarat, India.
Okay.
I lived there for a year. And
right.
it was a wonderful, life-changing experience. It was great.
It does. It sounds like it for sure. When did you kind of find yourself coming back to Canada and getting into film?
Oh, it was the year after that. Actually, I was in. A lot of people say, what made the decision for you to go into filmmaking? And for me, it was my parents.
Okay.
My mother.
Really?
Well, because I was in India, and I think they feared, I had long hair, and I was living in India, and I think they thought, uh-oh.
He's never coming home.
Yeah, we see where this is going, I think is what they thought. And so they sort of said, we're thinking about university for you, and we just want to kind of get going on that. So, is there an application we could submit on your behalf so that you, get into university when you get back? And I was like, I don't know. I'm sort of really interested in theater, and I'm really interested in the plastic arts and in painting, and I'm also really interested in music.
Okay.
And I'm not really decided what I want to do, and I think maybe I'd like to go and study, down east, because the universities at the time were much better there for the fine arts. And so my parents sent me an application for film school. And they said, we did some thinking, and we thought there's music and there's acting and there's visual art elements in film.
It's a melting pot of everything you want.
If you can't decide.
Yeah.
And I think what they were secretly thinking was musician equals penniless, right? Like painter equals penniless, actor equals penniless.
Yeah.
So maybe if he gets into film, we won't have to support him for the rest of his days.
Way to go, Mom.
Yeah. So I signed up for film school and went to film school.
Where'd you go?
York University. Yeah.
Okay.
In Toronto.
All right. How long's film school?
It's like, you know what? I did 3 years of film school. And then I decided that they couldn't teach me anything, man. Those teachers, I knew more than them. You know, what do they know?
Hello, Kevin Smith.
So I quit film school and I went to live in South America. I lived in Argentina, actually.
As you do.
As one does.
Yeah.
I was very interested in actually filmically what was going on in Argentina at the time. It's even more interesting now. But at the time, I was kind of interested in Latin America. I was interested in Latin American film. Mexico felt too close. Brazil was
dangerous.
No. It was well, you know.
Yeah.
When you're from Winnipeg,
everything's dangerous.
Where's dangerous, right? So it was the language. I was more interested in learning Spanish than Portuguese.
Okay.
Because I thought, where do you speak Portuguese? Brazil and Portugal.
Yeah, you're limited.
Is it Angola? Do they speak Portuguese in Angola? I think there's one place in Africa where they also speak Portuguese.
Yeah, I know they speak French in some. Like French is predominant over there more than any other language.
Yeah, there's a couple languages swimming around.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I sort of thought Spanish would be a language that would be more useful. So I knocked both Mexico and Brazil off the list, and Argentina, it makes a lot of movies, a lot of very interesting movies, and has a very interesting history in filmmaking.
Okay.
Including, Germans after the war bringing over like a whole laboratory and developing a film that had an emulsion on each side and really interesting stuff.
So it wasn't just a hideout for Nazis.
No,
some good things.
They did some stuff
cool.
when they were there, and then Kodak came in and shut everything down.
Yeah. Cannot make better products than we can.
Bought out everything and shut it all down. But I was living there for a couple years, and again, I had a lovely time and again, life-changing sort of experience. And then I came back to Canada, and I decided I wanted to go to Japan. And there was, these programs you can go over to Japan and they put you in a school to teach English.
Yes.
They last.
Quickest way to Japan.
Yeah. And I thought I really wanted to do that. But I had to have a university degree, and I, told my York professors to all stuff it. But I had a year that I needed to do.
Yeah.
So I went back and I was like,
all right, fine.
Sorry, guys. Could I drop in and do my last year? Actually, though, I said I want to do a last year. I don't want to do a production class and end up holding a boom for somebody and getting a credit as a filmmaker. I said, I'm very interested, after living in Argentina for 2 years, I'm very interested in doing a documentary about the history of the military dictatorship that everyone kind of carries around as a very personal history, and this idea of a personal history, because when an official history isn't written properly, the history kind of lives in all of these little individual stories that all seem to.
I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, and I was very interested in that idea because I met all my friends in Argentina. All had stories of an era where they were just kids, but they still had the stories.
Yeah,
and I thought that was really interesting. So I made a document, so I told York, don't put me in a production class. I want like an independent study class, and I'm going to go back to Argentina with all of your gear, and I'm going to shoot this documentary. And they said, okay. So I went back and I shot a piece about, essentially about the dictatorship and the history of the dictatorship and how people carry it around. And it focused a lot on torture. And we ended up I think Amnesty International still has it, as well as there's a place in Toronto called the Center for Victims of Torture. I think they still show it as well.
So like if you go to an exhibit, they've got that film playing in the background. Yeah, there's a story that you sit and watch for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they have it in their library. Sometimes they have events where they show it. And anyway, so I did that and finished that year of, and got my degree. And then I was ready to go to Japan.
Okay.
So then I went to Japan for 3 years, and it was fabulous. And I, taught English at a high school and played bass in a blues band, and made a couple of short films while I was over there. And
what's filmmaking like in Japan? Being an outsider, and like, how does it change?
Well, it's all in Tokyo,
okay.
and I was not in Tokyo, so I ended up in a beautiful place that I chose to live in. They asked me where I wanted to go, and I told them, and they put me pretty close, which is on the South Island of Kyushu. And
oh, wow.
yeah, and it was lovely. It's very close to Korea. It's very close to China. It's kind of tropically. It's got volcanoes and stuff at the bottom, and it's where as a kid I watched Godzilla romp around and destroy cities.
It sounds like where the fighting monster movies would be filmed.
Monster Island, I'm sure, was nearby.
Okay,
and so that was great. I mean, the films that I ended up making there, short films, were just using people who I met who were interested in filmmaking. There wasn't really a scene as such. There were a couple of interesting groups that watched films, right? That watched experimental films. There was another group that watched exclusively French movies, and we'd get together. And most of it was an excuse to drink.
Sure, yeah,
because it's Japan.
Not just in karaoke bars, everywhere else.
So, but that was also a very formative time.
When did you realize that filmmaking was something you wanted to do as a career versus something you went to film school? Like everybody who goes and does their career, I never went to higher education, so I'm not too familiar with it, but I assume that at some point you go, okay, this is it, because you're not 100% sure while you're in it, doing it, learning it, that this is, I mean, some people are, I would imagine, but did you have one of those aha moments where you were like, this is not kids anymore, I want to do this as a living?
Well, what it was really was a feeling that I couldn't, my 20s, as I've just kind of outlined to you. I spent most of my 20s with a backpack on, tromping around.
Learning the world.
Yeah, and having a great time, a great time.
I'm jealous. Just by listening. Me and my wife wanted to go to Japan this year, and we were like, I think we need to book a guide because I'm a problem child to go traveling with. I can get a little broody and pouty. So she was like, I don't want to be in an area where no one speaks English. And I mean, I'm sure they do, but she was like, I just don't want to be in that situation. So it's, you're shaking your head at me
no, they don't speak English.
Okay, all right. So it was a smart idea. Anyways, go on.
I came back because I was sitting on a beach in Indonesia. One of the great things about Japan, of course, is that
very close to other.
2 hours this way, 2 hours that way in an airplane, and you're in all these amazing spots. So I was sitting on a beach in Indonesia with a good friend of mine, and just kind of thinking, wow, I'm 29. All I've done is bum around and drink and have fun, and so maybe I should
fucking who, Sean?
Yeah. But there was that sense of
definitely,
I should maybe do something with my life, or am I going to be here 39 turning 40 going
same spot, ass cheeks in the beach.
Yeah. I mean,
totally.
I did meet a guy who we were celebrating his birthday. This is a side, but we'll get back to that. Yeah. I did meet a guy in Nagoya, and we were celebrating his birthday, this American guy who was a friend of a friend. And we went to a bar and we were celebrating his birthday, and he looked like he was 40-something. But when we clinked glasses together, he was turning 55. And he had just been in Japan kind of teaching English and chasing skirts and getting drunk for ever. And he looked a lot younger because he said, if I'd had a corporate job in America, I'd look 75 right now.
It'll burn you out.
But at the same time, it was a moment of wow, is that going to be me when I'm 55? It seems like fun, but... so
substance.
Yeah, there was a moment on that beach in Indonesia where I was like, okay, I'm 29, so maybe I should, I went to school for filmmaking. Maybe I should try to be a filmmaker.
Okay.
Or a bass player, which is my other thing that I do.
Okay.
And I felt very much like I wanted to come back home to do it because, everywhere else that I lived, one thing that really struck me was that I am an outsider here. And I make friends, and that's my role. I don't feel like I'm being excluded or anything, but my role when I get together with my friends is I'm the outsider.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And people are turn to me and say, hey, what's it like in Canada? Or what's it like in Winnipeg? Or here, this just happened. Does that happen back where you're from too? And
you have a different perspective.
Yeah. And so I kind of thought if I want to make films, I felt, that had kind of a real authenticity and that were able to kind of look beyond the surface of anything, I should maybe go back to where I'm from and try to tell stories from there. So I moved back here, and I sort of made a pact to myself, because I'd saved in Japan they pay you so well to teach English.
I've heard.
I did my very best to drink it all, and I couldn't. And I came back with $50,000, which in Winnipeg that's you could live for 10 years on that, right?
Dude, that's investment money. That's
huge.
That's Bedbugs film money,
totally.
Right?
So what I decided was I sort of thought, okay, I've got a little nest egg to borrow terminology from
Ostrich, but hey, go on.
I will. I won't get a job, quote unquote. I'm not going to work at a bank. I'm not going to work as a security
Fuck the cubicle.
guard. Yeah, I was like, I will work as a bass player or a filmmaker, and that's it. And if I run out of money and I have to get a job to survive, I'll go back to Asia. Like, I'll go back to Japan. I'll go back to Taiwan was hiring English teachers. Korea is an amazing place that I became addicted to. Sidebar, on my last trip to Korea, I was like, wow, trip number 19. I really should have spent more time in this place. There's so many times. But
I have friends that have done the Korean English teaching thing, and they love it. They say some of the most complimentary things about Korea.
It's the hidden like treasure of like, who do you know who's like, I'm going on a vacation, I'm going to Korea? Nobody. It's amazing. It's like wedged right between Japan and China. Like, how could it not be amazing?
How do you skip over it, right? Like, if you're out there, like my parents have done, they did China, they didn't go to Korea. I was like, how, you went to Vietnam? Great, awesome. Like, nothing against, but I have a buddy who works for Samsung. He went to Samsung City, and he's like, they're riding a wave of everything.
It's amazing. There. Yeah, it's an incredible place. Don't mention it on your podcast, because then everyone's going to go and they'll wreck it.
So you didn't hear it here first.
But no, I came back and I decided that as I was going to either play bass or make movies, and that was it. And one night I was over at my friend's place and we were just jamming, and it was like 2 a.m. He's a drummer. We were just playing literally in his basement, tunes from the old days. Guy I went to high school with, right?
Jamming out.
And he lived in a room, like a house with a bunch of other people, as one does. And this guy comes home, one of his roommates who was his piano player, like a professional piano player in Winnipeg, working all the time. And he came downstairs and he heard us jamming, and he's like, hey, can I sit in? So he sat in and we played some tunes together. And it was really fun. That Friday, the piano player had a gig and his bass player didn't show.
Oh boy.
His bass player actually, as it turns out, drove to Minneapolis to see Herbie Hancock play, and then, kind of calculated, okay, it's a 6.5-hour drive if we move fast enough, half an hour for the border, 7 hours before my gig, I'm leaving.
We can do this.
Yeah, and started driving south. And, in the States, when you're on the highways, there's like never any signs anywhere. And so he drove all the way south until he crossed the state line. And then he was like, oops, now I'm 13 hours away from Winnipeg and my gig is in like 2 hours. Like, I'm not going to make it.
Not happening.
Right? So he calls this guy with no notice, this piano player. He's like, I'm not going to be there.
Yeah.
And the piano player is like, calls every bass player he knows. Everyone's working. And it gets to this moment where he's like, who was that guy in the basement? We jammed that. Who was that guy?
Yeah, no
right?
kidding.
And so I get this call of like, can you be at this gig in an hour and can you read music? And so I started.
Not a big ask at all.
Yeah, I was cool with it. So I played that gig, and a lot of people were like, hey, who's that guy? Because that's how Winnipeg works.
Exactly.
And so in very short order, I had a career as a bass player. And I was playing with, the Weird Sisters, and I was playing with, Easily Amused, now Keith and Rennie, and I was playing with, everybody.
Yeah.
And it was great. I did about half a dozen CDs. I did a bunch of touring across Canada. Ultimately on a tour of Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can someone buy your life? Is it for sale somewhere? Like, can you get a plan to do this? Go to India, go to Indonesia, live in Korea, come back, trip into being a bass player. Like, this is this is some seriously awesome shit. Like, make the movie about your life, man.
It would be a very boring movie, I'm afraid.
No. Anyways.
We were on a rural tour of Saskatchewan, right? This with the Weird Sisters, actually. They had booked all these, and they paid very well, but it was one of these tours where, touring, of course, mostly sucks.
Yeah, it's hard
right?
on you. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were, every day playing a little small town in Saskatchewan. And I remember just thinking like, okay, I'm not touring anymore.
Yeah.
I can't.
It was sexy for a minute.
Yeah.
And,
but I didn't, there's a quote from Ray Charles that I love. He was on some Chicago radio station, and the guy found out how much he was making. I think he made $10,000 or $15,000, and the radio station guy was like, you get paid $15,000 to play 3 hours of music. And Ray Charles was like, oh, no. I get paid $50,000 for all the travel and the shitty hotels and horking all the gear. The music is free.
Yeah. It's what I have to put up with to get my job done.
Right, to get on stage. And so that side of touring really kind of eventually wore me down. And I was getting more into making short films, and I had done a couple of music videos for some of the bands that I
did
played
read
in.
that. Yeah, that's kind of where you
Started. Yeah.
cut your teeth, right?
Yep. And the first 2 music videos that I did got on like high rotation on Much Music. So
Nice.
of course, other bands in Winnipeg are like, who's that guy?
For anybody listening, what's Much Music, by the way?
Oh yeah, is that not a thing anymore?
It was a thing for us, but I don't like for kids listening here. Tell them what Much Music is.
Well, it's music videos played in between TV commercials,
basically
on television, 24 hours a day. And someone told me that they never released their ratings because there were moments on that show where literally across Canada, like 3 people were watching Much Music.
Really?
Well, it sometimes there were 3 million people watching, but because there weren't no shows as such, or very few shows, it was just nonstop 3 minutes of entertainment that you could turn on and turn off.
It was.
Yeah, there were moments where literally no one was watching.
That doesn't surprise me now that you look back. I mean, when they did start to do the shows, that's when I started watching it mostly because of like Electric Circus was funny, right?
Pop-up video.
Pop-up video is, I think, should be brought back. And like, if someone can fund the channel, I'll pay for a subscription to Pop-up Video, because there was so much nonsensical bullshit that came up in those videos. That Hornet is gonna, one of us.
You can hear him just now. I heard him in my ear.
He's an angry son of a bitch. But yeah, it was full of. I think that's where I have a lot of bullshit trivia in my mind from like, oh, that's the video, and it registered with you because you were watching it, right? But
yeah.
So there was a time when music videos were a huge. They told stories, right?
Yeah.
Like Garth Brooks doing Thunder Rolls.
I haven't seen that one.
Okay, but it's a story of domestic abuse.
Wow.
Like so you could tell a story in a music video at some point because they put so much money into them, but then music industry went digital, and who cares now, right?
My daughter cares, man.
Really?
Well, it's you get old and kids are doing what we were doing. I don't know. It's a whole thing, cycle of life, whatever. But what I was most excited about, of course, at the time doing music videos was it felt to me like the last refuge of experimental film and surreal film,
yeah.
a place where you could still do stuff that that you would never get money for in any other format. And so I really loved exploring that side of kind of visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And while I was doing those music videos, this is back in the days of film, right? When I first started making music videos, you had to shoot them all on film.
Okay.
And film is very, very expensive.
Well, yeah, because if you fuck up, you fuck up.
Well, and also because you have to buy the film, and then you have to, process the film and develop the film, and then you have to transfer the film to video, which is where it ends up before it goes on TV. And all of those processes done in labs in Toronto are just stupidly expensive. Back in those days, color correction you'd be paying $600 an hour to do color correction, which now you can do for free on DaVinci in your laptop, right?
Yes,
But at the time, it was crazy expensive. So we would take film and you'd over order it, because you didn't want to be caught at 3 a.m, right? Finishing up your music video and running out of film.
New tape.
Right?
We don't have any, guys.
Exactly.
Ooh.
So you always over-order a little bit.
Okay.
And so every music video that I did, I'd end up with 6 to 10 rolls of film.
All of a sudden you have stock.
So then I started realizing, and when I send the film into the lab to be processed, they're not like looking at it all. The band's not looking at it all. I mean, if I shot some film left over from one music video and then processed it on the next music video,
you can kind of,
no one would really know.
No.
And the person doing the transfer to video might go, wow, that doesn't look much like the rest of the music video. I don't know. It's like it's a dream sequence.
Yeah.
But
it's a flashback.
So I did my first couple of short films, basically with leftover footage and packaging them with music videos to get them.
How upcycled of you.
Yeah. Well, it was very very green.
Yeah.
Back in the day. And I was very lucky that my first film ever, my short film, it was called Middle, and it was about Winnipeg.
Yeah, man. I read about your original shorts just before I came over today, and I wanted to ask you about that. I was like, because Middle Province, Middle Coast, Middle was, and I was like, okay, everything you do has this charming sense of Winnipeg in it. So I'm like, I'm betting the first one is a love story to his hometown.
Well, and and it always struck me as one of the central kind of paradoxes of Winnipeg in a way that we are in geographically the middle of middle of North America.
Go on your way to Steinbach, man. It's right there.
Yeah.
You are the middle part of Canada.
Yeah, the very center of Canada, like horizontally.
Yeah.
But even vertically, horizontally, all of North America, we're like pretty much dead center.
Yeah.
When I traveled to other countries and the people are like, "Where are you from?" I'd be like, "Take North America. Put your finger in the dead center. You're going to be pretty close."
Yeah.
Right. Look under your finger. There we are. You squashed us. Right. But. So the film was kind of about how Winnipeg was so middle, so center, so prairies, at the square bottom of this province.
Yeah.
And yet my experience of Winnipeg is that everybody's just on the edge of, like, everyone's so weirdly cool, but weird.
Yes.
I grew up, all my friends and most of the people that I know and most of the Winnipeg bands that I listened to, everyone was just pushing the edges of...
Obscurity is a thing here.
Absolutely.
In everything that we do, like entertainment, food, it's just, it's in our secret sauce.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think if I had never known Guy Madden and someone had introduced me to his work and said, "Where does he come from?" I'd be like, I got a pretty good guess. Right? Because that's the kind of, and so that dichotomy of being in the middle and yet being not in the middle, really, and also not being in the middle, like, again, that thing that we talked about earlier, when you watch media in this country, we are not in the middle of that.
No.
We're at the edge of that.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, I remember seeing Jesus de Montréal, this great film from Quebec, and, the priest was very worried, or one of the priests, one of the central characters, was very worried about being sent off to Winnipeg, which, obviously is a code for the edge of nothingness, the edge of the empire.
You're on the precipice, man.
Yeah.
Like it's
we're going to send you way out to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And so, that dichotomy to me was very interesting. And so I made this kind of experimental-ish film, but that was also a comedy built around a couple of jokes that we thought were really funny. And I sent it out to a bunch of film festivals and everybody turned it down. Except a couple of film festivals that, like, you've never heard of. So it got second prize.
Obscure film festivals, per se?
If you could imagine.
Yeah.
Such a thing. Second prize comedy category at the Garibaldi Sea and Sky Film Festival.
Okay, where's that?
It's in Garibaldi, man. What do you mean, where is it?
Oh, I don't know where Garibaldi is. Sorry.
It's out in BC somewhere. I don't know where it is either.
Okay.
I'm joking.
You're the guy who backpacked. I'm the one who's been in Winnipeg his life.
and then we also won a prize for, I can't remember what, best 16mm film or something at the Cabbagetown Film Festival. And I was joking with a friend of mine who used to teach at Red River, Kenton Larson.
Yes, I follow him on Twitter. I know Kent. Yeah,
who teaches communications.
Yeah,
good friend of mine from high school.
Yeah,
and I was joking around that, like, oh, this is the sum of my ambition. These two, like, and he was like, no, dude, you should call the newspapers and tell them that you won those prizes. And I was like, why? So they can mock me?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh no. He was like, entertainment reporters, if there's a local story and you bring them the story, they don't have to, like, get off their asses and go find it. They'll take the story. Like,
interesting.
They will take it and they will print it. And I was like, what? Really? So I called them and I left a message, and sure enough, within 2 minutes, someone called me back and they were like, where are these film festivals and who are you and where are you from? And the next day there was, like, this very large feature in the entertainment section about local filmmaker wins prizes in Toronto and Vancouver. The implications being that it was the Toronto and Vancouver Film Festival.
Totally.
Which, of course, it was not.
Yeah. The little Garibaldi.
Yeah, the Garibaldi in Cabbagetown. But the result of that was that when I went back to Manitoba Arts Council to apply for some money for my next film, there was a sense of, like, oh yeah, we know you. Yeah, you were in the newspaper.
Yeah,
right.
Interesting.
Local filmmaker. Suddenly I'm a local filmmaker because I had a film that won some prizes recognized by outsiders, which that's the important thing.
Yes.
And so, the next film that I made, I actually had a budget. I had like $45,000, which at the time felt like a lot of money to make a film.
Yeah.
And so, we got the big crew and we had dollies and we built our locations and I was able to really design it. And we made this, much larger production, and that, led to another film. And then I was planning to do a fourth film. And at the time I was very influenced by Bruce Sweeney, who's a Vancouver filmmaker. And he himself had discipled under Mike Leigh in England. but very much in the school of John Cassavetes. All these guys are doing very similar kind of work, which is letting actors improvise.
Not keeping to the page.
Right. Well, no, not having a page.
Oh, not at all.
Right.
Okay.
So basically kind of designing a story. I mean, there are various different ways of approaching it, but essentially the concept at the core is, actors, if they are looking at a text and they're using Stanislavski or some other method to hack into the meaning of the text and try to get inside, there's a real journey for them, and some are better than others. But when you're improvising, you start inside.
Yeah.
Like you're there. As soon as the camera is rolling or you're on a stage and you're improvising, you're in the scene and trying to figure out who you are and kind of working your way out. Exactly. Build it from the inside. And so I always thought that was really cool. And then especially as a musician there's a lot of improv in music, and I find that a lot of times
is improv at its core.
Yeah, and backing up a singer-songwriter who doesn't know what he's doing has a lot of improv elements that and they struck me as, in music, very transcendental moments. When everyone is using this language, which is not English or any kind of spoken language, and we're communicating with each other on stage because no one knows what's going on.
You're in the flow.
Yeah. And I thought, it would be so cool to catch that on camera. That's what kind of led me to Mike Lee and Bruce Sweeney and all these guys. And then when I saw what they were all doing, I was like, that's really cool. I want to do that, but I want to do a different version of it. And my version was, and this again is planning my 4th short film, right? My version was, I started with a concept, which was a romantic comedy that would be a love triangle, but with 4 people in it, where everybody loves everybody else, but that's never reciprocated. Right. So nothing ever. And I sort of thought, wouldn't it be cool to make it kind of an anti-romantic comedy where, as opposed to people who you go, I wish they would get together. And in the end, they do.
Yeah. Right.
I thought, wouldn't it be better if it was one of those couples that we've all seen where you're like, those people need to break up. Like they're so bad for one another.
Everybody has that friend in their group.
Yeah. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if like the goal of my romantic comedy was to break everybody up?
I love it.
Right. And so I started down a road. I got some local actors and we started improvising in my basement. I was paying them with my ghastly homemade wine, which would give them terrible headaches, and yet somehow they kept coming back.
Your alcohol content maybe was a little too high.
Really, really horrible stuff. And we spent 6 months basically improvising this story.
Creating.
Creating. And I started it. I kept secrets from them was my method. I kind of wrote the story, but I didn't tell them what it was. And then we improvised the scenes chronologically, and I let them discover on camera these kind of story elements, and I'd have the characters themselves keep secrets from one another and then dump them on each other on like in front of the camera.
So the moment was
the moment.
The moment was the moment. It wasn't rehearsed. It's
Yeah.
Everybody's experiencing it for the first time,
and we're watching it.
Hey, you want to talk about experimental film? That's playing.
I love it, and actors, not all actors, but the actors that I ended up working with really loved it too.
Yeah,
right.
Well, because I guess their craft is really being used, and they're driving it, as opposed to traditionally. Correct me if I'm wrong. A director's like, I need you to do this, or I want to pull more of this out of you. It's like, no, here's the reins.
Yeah,
do it, right. So that's what they went to school for.
Absolutely, and when we do a take 2 and a take 3. They didn't have to. There wasn't a lot of forcing it for them. They were able to remember what that emotional state was in take 1 and just kind of go back there. And for me to be able to say to them, don't worry about the lines. Whatever you said last take is last take. We have it on the camera already. We got it.
Yeah.
Don't need it again.
Yeah.
This time, see where else it might take you. Right. And so we ended up with some extraordinary number. I think it was 26 hours or something of video. And I took that video and I boiled it down to what was going to be my script for a short film. It ended up being more like a mini series.
I was going to say.
Yeah, no, it came out at like it would if we'd shot that thing, it would have been like a 3.5 hour movie.
Yeah.
Right. And nonetheless, a friend of mine, Brendan Sawatsky, who is a local producer and was wanting to produce more at the time, he was just starting out, as I was, said, "Hey man, there's this program we can apply for people making their first time features. Are you working on anything?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, I've got this beast of a thing that I thought was a short film.
Got a lot of chopping to do."
Yeah, it's too long, but and we ended up sending it. I actually to write the final thing, because I had all my notes scribbled on napkins and whatever else. To write the final script, I actually went to...
Very Kerouac of you, by the way.
Yeah, well, also very poverty inspired.
Sure, yeah.
I went back to Japan because I had a friend there. We were staying together. I went back to Japan and I wrote it in this little apartment in Kokura, a city in Japan in the south. And I wrote the whole thing out. And we just made the deadline, like literally by 10 minutes, because I was sending Brendan pages basically from night, because it was night in Japan,
Yeah,
daytime
time
here,
change,
right?
totally.
I was sending him pages, and he was printing them out as I was writing them, and he just got the script together and handed it. Luckily, the office was in Winnipeg, and he sort of handed this thing in. And the National Screen Institute decided to give us a bunch of development dough and bring us along in their program, and
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we started developing this feature out of nowhere, this thing that I thought would be a short. And we started developing it, and we went on this amazing program, and I really felt that the story notes that we got from our story editors started to really help shape it, and we sort of really found it. Plus, I had the bonus of 26 hours of source material.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I got stuck with how would
Totally.
people react? Like, how would my characters react here? I've been writing it this way, and it's not working, and I go back to the tapes, and I'd be like, oh, that's how they'd react. There they are.
Exactly.
Let me just write that out, right? And it was so.
That's a reverse.
Yeah, totally.
Essentially.
Totally. And it's a great way to work. I mean, anyone who's listening who's interested in filmmaking, I strongly advise testing out the waters for yourself on this method and seeing if you like it. Because, I mean, the collaboration with actors is so rewarding, and the stuff that you get is so
Genuine.
genuine. It's also just never what I would write. Like, you play it with actors, and you're like, oh, if I was sitting down and writing it, I never would have done it that way.
Totally.
And that's so much more interesting than what I would have written.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of breaking in sketches when the break happens, when the genuine hilarity of anything, or when you can see, or when I hear a note about how a film had, like, this is an improv scene, I'm always glued to that more than I am. Yeah, okay, it's instructional, it's off the page, and it's a great idea, but that moment, it's lightning in a bottle.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And so I've always been kind of in pursuit of those moments, and this was kind of an attempt to boil it down to a script. So we got the script in pretty good shape, and we were starting to sort of put the money together. Script still needed another pass or two, and we didn't know exactly how we were going to go about doing it, because neither Brendan nor I had ever made a feature. And we had this magical moment that's only happened to me once in my life, which was then Prime Minister Jean Chrétien gave a whole bunch of money to Telefilm Canada and said, listen, there's an election coming up. I want this money, like, on the floor somewhere in Canada I need to see films being made.
Yeah.
Right? Because they need to be in production when I'm giving my campaign speeches. Now, don't quote me on that. That's what I imagine he said.
I'm not, I won't quote you, but I'm not going to say you're wrong.
Right? And so we got a call from Telefilm Canada. Oh my God, anyone who's a filmmaker listening knows this never happens, and certainly has never happened to me since. Telefilm Canada called us and said, hey, we know you guys are developing this movie. Are you ready to shoot it? Because we got some money for you. And we were like, of course we are.
Fuck off, click. Right? Don't fuck with me, buddy.
Yeah, who are you, Mom?
Yeah.
Stop calling.
Yeah.
But no, we said, of course we are. We weren't, but we said, of course, yes, we could start shooting tomorrow if we needed to. And so we put the money together in like a record period of time. Like, really quickly, we suddenly had this whole budget, and we were shooting the movie, and the next thing I knew, I was directing my first feature, kind of quite by surprise.
Which is Inertia?
Which is Inertia, that's right. And
the trailer, I'm going home to watch it.
Okay.
This. Like, out of everything I watched, I really did want to watch your first and your last to get an idea of everything that you've done.
Of how I've gone nowhere from the first one to the last one.
Fuck off. No, man. Seriously, I absolutely, we'll get into it, but so Inertia is your first feature, and it sounds so accidental, right? It sounds creative. Yeah. It sounds a journey that you're not prepared for because you're doing it by the seat of your pants, not necessarily in that example, but you're like, let's just put it out there and see if it works. And then all of these lovely things come into play for you.
Yeah, it was very, very lucky. I was lucky enough to be able to just bring back my original actors. We got a little bit of pressure to hire some Americans or some Toronto stars, as one does. But I was like, we really don't have the money for that. Like, with what you guys are giving us, like, I love the money. Thank you very much. It's great. We can make our movie. But, we can't hire people outside of Winnipeg. Plus, these are the actors who played the roles, like in the improvs.
They put it on the screen.
Yeah, man. It's like,
to ask somebody to then replicate that, you might as well have just written it to begin with.
Totally. And I was like, in a way, these actors are kind of co-authors.
Yes.
And I did give them that credit at the end of the movie.
That's
And so they, we shot it with those actors, and it was so great because they recognized the lines. They had essentially written them together with me. I had to change them, but and whenever anything went wrong on set, or someone would forget a line, or like a set piece would fall over, and they'd have to just sort of roll with it, they were able to improvise because that's how they started it. They were in character, staying in character. It was really an exciting project.
Well, the actor-director relationship, that's, I would imagine the environment you're creating is what a lot of actors would love to have on the regular. Like, this is how we've always done it, is a big problem in any industry, right? That's the death of your industry if you're hanging on to, well, no, we do it this way.
Right.
Improv is great and all, but that could be expensive, or that could be time-consuming, where you're like, fuck that. This is the beauty that can come from it.
Yeah, well, and we really managed to do some. I mean, I was so proud of those actors, man. They really turned in just amazing sort of performances. And as you know, because you've stalked me,
yes,
the film ended up
in
getting
the most complimentary way.
The film ended up getting into the Toronto
Film Festival,
yeah, and doing very well there.
Best Canadian feature.
Yeah, we won a prize.
When they say Best Canadian First Feature, is that them being like, this is your first feature?
Yes.
Okay, all right. That's a big award to win, man.
It was a big award. And suddenly, at the end of the Toronto Film Festival, on the last day, they told me the night before, they said, tomorrow morning we're going to give you this prize, so we want you to come to the press conference. So I go to the press conference, and there's that moment that you see in American films where everyone like thrusts a microphone. Like, I literally was standing there with like 30 microphones.
Who's
in my
filming
face.
this? This must not be real.
I was like, what? What? Sadly, I mean, not sadly, but I mean, as it turned out, that was 2001, September, and my film premiered September 12th, 2001.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah, so the day before, they'd shut down the film festival while the towers burned.
Yep.
And nobody from Winnipeg could come out. I was there from the beginning of the festival because they were giving me a pass, and I could watch free movies.
Travel. A bunch of people are trapped in Newfoundland.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
I had a whole bunch of people who said, when's your film showing? September 12th? Okay, we'll fly out the day before. But they didn't.
Nope.
And then I got stuck in Toronto. I couldn't get back. I was out there for like 3 weeks before there was a flight.
Really?
Well, because they just canceled everything. And then all the guys who have like Fat Cat cards, when you're on the plane and the Fat Cats load first.
Yeah,
and they,
yeah.
all those guys.
I'm going to refer to that as the Fat Cat card from now on. I love that.
Right. So the Fat Cats got to take all the flights and get themselves home, and the rest of us had to kind of wait. And so, I was stuck there for 3 weeks. But there was a lovely, you talked about serendipity with that film. There was a lovely moment of serendipity that I'm very, very pleased with, which is the very first scene in the movie. I'm going to wreck it for you. The very first scene in the movie is this moment where our two main characters have had sex, and she's trying to sneak out while he's still asleep. And so he gets up, and he's naked, and he comes to the door, and she's trying to leave, and it's winter in Winnipeg, so he grabs one of her sorels. Because she can't leave without, right? So
that's the Winnipeg death trap right there.
And she's like, it's over. This was just a mistake.
Yeah.
This was XX. I shouldn't have come back. And he's like, no. This is you coming back to me. I see you need a break.
Yeah,
but this is our moment. This is our rekindling. And she's like, no.
Is that Jonas?
Yeah, it's Jonas.
Okay.
He's like, I do a good Jonas impersonation after all these years.
I've seen 3 movies with him in it already. Well, 2.5, and I love him. He's fantastic.
I'm also a big fan. So he tries to entice her back to bed, and she tries to get him to accept basically what would be the central conflict of the film.
Yes.
Accept that it's over. And he's trying to get her to accept that she's just on a break because she's scared of committing. But
I know better for you,
he's there
baby.
for her. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know better for you, baby. And that's kind of how the film starts. Now, when we shot a couple of takes of it, my crew, who cared about the movie very much, and a lot of them actually gave back payments because they were so supportive of the film. They're just so awesome, that crew. Said, are you at all worried that you have full frontal male nudity to start your film off, and that's going to limit your distribution options? And I was like, no, I love that. I mean, I love that he's naked, which is emotionally his state for the whole film. This guy wears his heart on his sleeve. I mean, Jonas basically does that in all of his roles in all of his movies. But she is this mysterious character that has a secret that we're not going to find out till the end of the film. So she's wrapped up like layers of an onion, and she's got, the Winnipeg thing, shirts and sweaters.
It's the dichotomy. He's completely naked, and she's wrapped.
And she's all
tight.
wrapped up, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of how the characters will develop over the course of the movie. And so I was like, no. I mean, it's my central visual metaphor. It's my kind of opening statement. And they said, well, you should shoot one with his pajama bottoms on, just in case. And I was like, no, just in case, because then in post, you guys are going to put pressure on me to...
You're going to CGI the shit out of it, yeah.
Or there wasn't CGI back then,
sorry,
it was
yeah.
film.
Yeah.
But you're going to force me to choose the take with the pajamas, right? Because... And so we fought, and my producer Brendan came up, and he was like, the crew loves the movie. They love you. They're just trying to do it to support you, man. Just shoot the take with the pajamas. And against my better judgment, I did it, and I thought, okay, I'm setting up a real fight for myself in post-production.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to try and pressure me to use that take instead of the full frontal male nudity, which is still, for some reason, taboo in film. And
we all have one. Like, we all have the parts we see on screen. It blows my mind.
Yeah, how that's...
It's just so... Ooh.
Yeah. You can murder people.
Yeah.
You can disembowel them on camera. That's okay.
Yeah.
But don't show people naked.
Saw movies, but you won't let the penis free.
Fly free in the wind.
Yeah.
As it was born to.
Yes. Intentionally.
But here was the magic hand of serendipity. We sent the film to be processed. It was a very long take. So we could only fit 2 takes on a reel because it was like a 10-minute long or a 5-minute long take, and they were 10-minute reels.
So Tarantino of you.
So I shot my first 2 with him naked. We put the reel in the can to be sent off to the lab. I got the next reel out. We shot the pajama take, and we put that in the can and sent it off to Toronto. The next morning, we got some very bad news from the lab. One of the reels had been destroyed. I'm totally serious. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how the gods stepped in to save me on that one. So the reel that had the pajama take was wrecked. Light somehow leaked into it. The whole reel was wrecked. Everything was destroyed.
Oh, my God.
And so we only had the take of him naked, and so that's what went in the movie. And let me tell you, man, that's what, like, every review we got, every criticism that was written about the film somehow mentioned that either in their headline or in their first paragraph. It was like the signature of the movie when it went out into the world.
It is. I can't wait to see it, but I can only imagine, like, that is very in your face on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Not just, dick hanging in the wind, but I'm very glad that worked out for you.
Me too. And then a couple years later, someone was like, have you seen Forgetting Sarah Marshall? Because they stole your opening scene. Like 10 years later, 15 years later, something, that movie has like the exact same opening.
It totally does, because he comes around the corner and he's eating cereal and she shows up to dump him.
He's naked and she's dumping him, and it's the same scene.
You should make a call.
It's the same scene.
Yeah, it's totally.
They're obviously fans of the movie. They obviously own copies. They probably have pictures of me up in their homes.
Yeah, creative license and all that shit, right? So Inertia's your first, and it's written and directed by you.
With the help of...
but just for credit based.
Yes.
My question goes to, you have directed and you have written. Where do you like both? One more than the other? Do you play, like, where does your...
I don't see them as different jobs.
Okay.
I mean, they, obviously they are different in a way, but I mean, film is not written in words. I mean, obviously film is written in color and gesture and music and movement and pacing, and that's how you write a film. And so a script for me is always just kind of a blueprint, especially with this background in improv. Right?
Yeah.
I look at a film as like, okay, this is a script is kind of like, okay, this is sort of how it kind of has to go. And emotionally, these are the beats that it has to hit. And, I get that. Here's the map.
Yeah.
That's what the script is. But I've always looked at those two jobs as, different parts of the same job, which is why I've almost exclusively written my own scripts. And why sometimes I have very bad luck with them, because I know what I mean, so I just kind of leave them in almost an unpolished state, because I know what I'm going to do with it when I get to set.
Yeah.
And then people will read it and be like, wow, this feels very unfinished. I'm like, because it's not a movie yet.
Well, and it hasn't been done.
Yeah.
It's just been we've got a road.
Yeah.
We'll get to the end destination soon enough.
That's right. This thing's just a map.
So I started with Borealis, and I guess my first question is, your working relationship with Jonas seems like the age-old saying of riding a bike.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, Borealis was a trickier one for us. We did my second film, Lucid, together.
Yes, which the whole story is it a thriller?
Yeah, it's a paranormal thriller.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking very forward to watching it, because the lead female actress in it, I remember her from a curling movie that she did with Gross.
Oh yeah. Michelle Nolden.
Michelle Nolden, yeah. She was comedic genius in that movie.
She's great.
The stoic that comes from her as an astronaut mixed in this curling comedy. But those are the two I really wanted to do. But okay, sorry to interrupt you. So Jonas.
So Jonas and I wrote that together. Jonas had the original idea.
Yeah.
And then he brought it to me and I was like, yeah, it's really interesting. Because he was like, now that we've done one, would you consider directing this one? And I read it and I thought, yeah, it's missing kind of this and this and this. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, if it was me, I would do this here and that over there. And I would change your whole second act to be this. And he was like, we should write it together. Let's write it together.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, okay, let's write it together. So we wrote it together. And we agreed on all of the broad strokes, and we get ideas and we bounce them off each other. It was a very good relationship. But when we got telefilm money and we were now stampeding towards production, prep was coming up and we were doing our final pass in the script.
You're in sixth gear and you're getting ready to...
Then it gets down to like, this joke is funny. No, it's not. Like the lines, the individual little ton of details.
The minutia.
Yeah, and we couldn't agree on any of it, and we'd gone in as 50-50 writers.
Oh, boy.
And so it just was no end of fireworks and conflict and sparks and, and we ended up, making it as one does, but we thereafter decided that henceforth we would continue to work together, but one of us would officially be the writer and one of us would officially be the suggestor.
Okay.
And that would be our relationship. And so depending on the film, one of us did actually the writing and the other one did the suggesting. And that doesn't actually mean that the writer did most of the work. On some of these films, the suggester actually came up with more of the stuff.
Yeah.
But the writer was the one who decided this goes in, this goes out.
I was going to say the sharing of the workload, because I see a running theme with everything that you do, the comedy, the kooky, the dark humor. Like and these are things that I love. Like I have fallen off the path of independent and experimental film in the last couple of years, and my wife loves the stuff you make.
Oh, wow.
And so it's pulled me back in, and I went in, I was like, I'm not going to watch these trailers. I'm just going to have an experience with them. And the running theme is the Churchill, Flin Flon, Winnipeg, Gimli. These are, when you're asking for telefilm money, is there a run-in where you say, hey, I want to make a story about this place called Winnipeg, and someone's like, Winnipeg? Is there conflict there with that? Because we're both biased. We're from here. We love this stuff. So when I see things like Jonas and his daughter driving up to Flin Flon and fucking up because they get to the end of the road, and he was like, oh yeah, we flew in on our honeymoon but we didn't drive here. Like, that is quintessentially a Manitoba road trip gone wrong. So when you pitch these stories, do you have a hard time selling the Winnipeg aspect?
Well, I mean, it gets to the essential, I think, push-pull that makes film, not only in Canada but everywhere, a kind of a dynamic medium, right? I mean, there's this cliche that the problem with film as an art is that it's actually a business, and the problem with film as a business is that it's actually an art, right? And so every film that you make, you're pitching telefilm Canada. I mean, not every film, but I mean, when they're involved, you're pitching, public agencies, Telefilm Canada and Manitoba Film and Music, and you're talking to Cavco, and you're talking to all these different agencies, and you're pitching them on your film. But at the same time, you can't make a movie on just that money. It also has to have some private money. So you're also talking with distributors and broadcasters and exhibitors and foreign sales agents. And telefilm is happy to hear about Winnipeg and Gimli. A foreign sales agent does not want to hear about Winnipeg and Gimli.
Yeah.
Right? And so you get into this weird world where you end up developing kind of two sets of pitches as you're developing your materials. Something that pleases, the government, and also something that pleases sort of the private sector. And it ends up being really neither when you finally make the film. But pitching Winnipeg is like telefilm loves stories about Winnipeg.
Yeah,
they love them.
And I saw at the end of all the credits like telefilm and everybody who's involved. And I do work with On Screen and Manitoba Film and Sound and stuff like that. And they are amazing organizations for Manitoba film and music and stuff. But then I do know also that you make a movie, there are some silent partners, there's some other outside financial investors who they're like, well, if you're going to get this, you have to put my wife in it or some bullshit like that, right? So when you get to the Winnipeg part, I mean, it must be because it comes off on screen amazingly, right? But in the pitch process, I could imagine it would be like, well, what's this Winnipeg you speak of, sir?
Yeah, and certainly more so when you're in the stage that I'm in now with my new one, which is taking it out and trying to get people to see it, and you're talking to press, and you're talking to, you know, newspapers and radios and TV stations and whatever else, and you're trying to sort of sell this movie. I have never done an interview, I swear, in 20 years of making movies, I have never done an interview with an organization from Toronto where they haven't at some point asked me, so why Winnipeg? Right? It's like they just don't get, like, you know, we're sitting right here in Toronto. I mean, why would you? Winnipeg, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're constantly explaining why we make movies about Winnipeg in Winnipeg. But, you know, I think it's an essential thing to do, and it gets right back to where we started at the beginning of this talk, where I talked about growing up in Winnipeg and looking up at the screen and going, I don't see myself, and I don't see my town, and I don't see my experience or my culture on these screens.
You're a amazing ambassador for it. Like it's genuine, it's balanced, everybody can relate. Like I'm watching these movies and I'm hearing these jokes. Like my favorite scene in Borealis was Jonas's line where he was like, "You're breaking our agreement. You're not supposed to smoke weed in front of me." And I'm, as you tell me that there's the suggester and the writer. Is that from you? Is that from him? Because there's very personal scenes in some of these, and knowing that you're a writer director, where are you pulling these? Where are some of these? Tell me one of these suggestions you made for Borealis, and which one made it to screen versus what was.
Well, Borealis was originally a short film called Blind that I made.
Okay.
So I wrote the story.
Okay. All right.
And you know, I wrote the story of a dad and his daughter, and she was going blind, and he rented an RV, and they did a trip across Canada. The original short film, and you can find it. It's online. It's everywhere.
Okay.
It's actually of all my films, it's my wife's favorite. And I was like, "What? It's a short film. What do you mean it's your favorite?"
I'm better at an hour and a half. Come on.
But you know, but in that film, it was a trip across Canada. From Moncton to the Rockies.
Okay.
And where in Borealis he wants to show her the Northern Lights before she loses her sight.
Well, and her name Aurora Borealis.
Yeah. So that's all of that came in the feature.
Okay.
Right. In the short film, he's taking her to the Rockies to show her the most beautiful thing he's ever seen in his life, which is the Rockies. The ending is the same. Right. And the sort of journey of dad and teenage daughter coming to terms.
It's about the journey. It's not about the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the missing mom and coming to terms with that, and all of that is in the short film.
It was pulling at my heartstrings.
Oh, I'm glad.
Watching him fuck up continuously and just be like the poker scene where he's like throwing, like there are some very it's awkward. I couldn't turn away. And I like it when my back's up against the couch, when I'm like, oh, this is hard to watch because it is so real. It is so genuine, and that was it. Emily Hampshire, I mean, that's Schitt's Creek fame, which she's now gone off and been fantastic. How did she come into your life? Because she's a small part in Borealis, but a lead in my awkward sexual adventure.
I mean, I have always been a fan of Emily Hampshire. I saw her in like one of her first films, and it was a very small Canadian film that nobody really saw. And I remember thinking, like, oh my God, who is that? Look at how. Like as a director, I'm watching this actor make. I mean, there was a scene in this one film that I remember, one of her early films, where she knocks on a door, and the choices that she made about how she knocked and what she did with her face and where she put her hand, and they're just like all these little micro choices. I was like, she's so interesting to watch. Like everything she does is just slightly unexpected.
Her facial gestures, her non-verbal cues are fantastic.
Yeah. But I mean, just as an actor, because you can sort of say as a director, you know, I want you to cross the room, I want you to cross it, whatever, as though there are minds under the floor, like very, very silently, I want you to do this, I want you to do that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the actor is still in charge of all of the minutia of it. And, you know, and that's really what defines an interesting or uninteresting person to watch, right?
Yes, for sure.
Keanu Reeves, very famous actor, very uninteresting to watch.
Totally.
Right?
Cardboard.
Yeah. But Emily Hampshire, oh my God, everything she does, I want to watch her. So we saw her in these two very small independent films from Toronto, and we tried to get her into Lucid.
Oh, okay.
And we couldn't get her. And so Awkward, we were told by some people who had some money in the film, private money, not public money, that we had to cast somebody super sexy as the lead. And I sort of said to Jonas, how about Emily Hampshire? And we were back and forth on it. At first, Jonas was like, what? Are you crazy? Emily Hampshire? She's sort of quirky and odd, and she makes these... That's a crazy choice. And I was like, is it a crazy choice? And I kind of went home thinking, yeah, maybe it's a crazy choice. Meanwhile, Jonas started thinking, Emily Hampshire. And so we got back together, and he was like, I love that idea. And I was like, no, you were right. She's wrong for the part. He was like, what? No, you're crazy. She's great for the part. I was like, really? And we did a lot, right? And then we'd switch again, and I'd go home, and I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe he's right. And Jonas was thinking the same thing. Oh, maybe Garrity's right. Maybe she's wrong. Anyway, we were kind of back and forth, but eventually we came together and we decided she is absolutely the best character for that. The best actor for that, precisely because she's not a blonde model-looking glamour queen. She's an interesting character with depth, and the way that she handles her roles is just so interesting.
Her going from being a stripper to wanting to be a chef, and her, like, there's depth to a character, and as soon as you see stripper, you're like, oh, don't even give that person lines, right? Like, so you definitely nailed a romantic comedy in a way that normally isn't talked about. And I wonder, there are some incredibly awkward sexual moments in that movie. Okay.
There are.
And I loved it because those are real people's awkward sexual moments. I'm not going to say which ones mine are, but I want to ask you, how much responsibility do you feel talking about something that is so personal, while at the same time something that can be laughed at, because laughing at it gets you through it?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I am much more interested in, this is not in any of my films, but I'm saying, for an example, when you're writing a story, if someone comes to me and says, I have a great story and it's about this guy and he's in the army and he has this big sort of scene where he has to save orphans, and cross the enemy lines. And someone else comes to me and says, I have a scene about a guy who masturbates to Disney films and feels shame. I am so much more interested in that movie, right? Because it's intimate and it's relatable, and I feel like that kind of stuff is not just sexual stuff, but stuff that is more intimate and more emotional and more grounded in how we live our lives day to day. It's just much more interesting material, and I think I want to see it more, and I'm lucky enough in my career to have made mostly the kind of movies that I would like to see as a viewer. And so that is my answer to your question.
What was the most positive effect that came from this? Because it's a very personal journey for both characters to go through. The opening scene was ridiculous. I was laughing my head off from start to finish. Like where she, like, the argument about how they need to go, and his, like, 1, 2, like, it's just like, there's so many things in it. But I imagine, like, what was the most positive thing that came off a set or off telling that story for you? Like when you were...
Well, I mean, the mixed blessing of that film was that it was, to date, by far my most popular film.
Okay.
So we sold it in 24 countries, and it was translated into 15 languages.
Yeah, I read that. I was like, that's a lot of languages for a film.
And they remade it. At first we didn't believe that we thought our sales agents had messed that up somehow.
Yeah.
That Lithuania wanted to maybe buy it and he'd gotten it wrong, but he didn't. They wanted to buy the rights to the story and remake it. So it was going to be the story, instead of a guy from Winnipeg who goes to Toronto, has this sexual awakening, and then comes back to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
It was going to be the story of this guy in Lithuania who goes to London and connects with a Lithuanian stripper working in London.
Okay.
Has his sexual adventure there and comes back to Lithuania. But same film. And they actually made it. And it ended up being the number 3 or number 4 film in Lithuania that year. Like, not Lithuanian film, just film, period.
Whatever.
Beat Lord of the Rings that year, beat Argo that year.
That's so crazy.
It was a huge film in Lithuania. And they sent us a copy of it, and they were like, oh, we don't have English subtitles. Is that okay? And we were like, no, we kind of know it's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we knew.
But some of the crazy things in that film were just all of the little choices that you make as director that you don't even think about. But that, for example, there was a scene in her bedroom. The woman, not the stripper, but the fiance, is in her bedroom.
Lovely girl.
Yeah, she's great. Rachel. She's so fantastic.
Yeah. She nailed being an absolute bitch.
Yeah. Then the stuff that we cut out, man, let me tell you, was so funny. She had us in stitches. There's a scene where she's looking into her mirror.
Yes.
And there are pictures of her life with the main character kind of taped around the edges of the mirror like petals on a flower.
Yes.
And she has this kind of moment where she's like, damn it, I know what I need to do. I need to go find him. The reason that the pictures are taped to the edge of the mirror like petals of a flower was because when the grips were moving the mirror into the room, they cracked it. And I thought it felt a little more low rent than what I wanted her to be as a character, to have a big crack in her mirror.
Yeah, that says, she's living in a crappy apartment.
So totally, people extrapolate from that, and so we took the pictures that were originally on the wall, we took them off the wall, and we pasted them around the edge of the mirror. So I'm watching this Lithuanian remake, and I guess they thought that there was some kind of content-related metaphoric value to that. So they've got all these pictures painted,
That's awesome.
taped to the mirror. But that's an example of one of about 1,000 decisions that, as a director, you make that I saw these Lithuanians imitate in their film, and it was a very freaky, thing to watch.
I would imagine,
right?
Because it's nothing to you, but it's something to them, and now it's something to you when it was nothing to you.
Yeah, I made a decision because of some practical stuff on the set at the time.
Yeah,
and they would then, attribute value to that.
There's art in this,
right?
What did you think of their remake?
It was very interesting. I mean, they cut out.
I shouldn't say not rated. What I mean is, what's it like watching something that you've done remade? The compliment of a cover, right?
Yeah.
Like Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah is just been done by my mom. Did a cover of it. That's how many people have done that song.
Totally.
So when someone covers your story or wants to retell your story, what is that?
Yeah, that's obviously very, very flattering.
Yeah,
but that's not the end, because after the Lithuanians remade it and it made so much money for them, the Ukrainians remade it. There's a Ukrainian remake of this that exists and is out in the world and did very well for them in the Ukraine. And as we speak, they're doing one in India.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Like a film about some of the most ridiculous incidences in sex, especially in India. How are they going to do this in India?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I mean, it's interesting that the guy was very clear. He's like, we're not Bollywood. This is not a Bollywood movie. He's like, streaming services, and HBO is, I think, the biggest one in India, actually, as opposed to Netflix. But streaming services for Indian films are very, very big in India, and racier material does much better there.
Okay.
And so,
because they're all so repressed that they're like, give me access.
I guess. I don't know, but the guy was like, so we are specifically searching for material that's a little racier than a standard Bollywood movie. And so, he bought the rights and they are remaking it.
I want to see all three of these. I'm going to look for them.
It's one of these things where you say, how many Winnipeg movies have been remade?
Like nobody goes. There's this lovely Winnipeg story about going down on your girlfriend properly and learning the journey that Jordan goes through. Jonas's character is one, and I can even I think every guy can relate to one of those scenes, because having the conversation with your parents is hell. Like, I remember the first time I had a sexual conversation with my mother, I had seen Wayne's World for the first time. And it's the scene where they go, Wayne, do you want anything? And he's ordering Chinese, and his response is, I'll have the cream of some young guy. Fast forward to me in the Kildonan Place food court with my mother. The lady goes, what would you like? I said, the cream of some young guy, please, not knowing what that meant.
Oh, really?
Totally.
What were you, 6?
Yeah, something like that. My mom didn't let me watch a lot of shit. Long story short, those scenes I can relate to very well. So is that something that where is he pulling from personal history? Are you asking your cast and your crew where some of these scenarios, I'm just curious to see where the inspiration comes from, some of that awkwardness.
So for that one, Jonas came to me and said, would you be interested in doing a sex comedy? And I was like, no. And he's like, but I got one. Would you read it? And I was like, yeah, okay. So I read it, and I was like, I don't know. All these jokes seem pretty juvenile. And he was like, but what if they weren't? What if we worked together and made them less juvenile?
Yeah. Stop being dick and fart and being a little bit more.
Yeah, and having some meat to them. And so, that's kind of where it came from. Jonas was there was a moment where he wanted to do a trilogy, as his sexual dysfunction trilogy, 3 movies of 3 stages of life of sexual dysfunction. We never got anywhere with that, but this was to be the first one. And he brought some of his experiences to it. He had a very sexually experimental girlfriend, way back, in Winnipeg. And he a lot of the places that she sort of took him, and a lot of the experiences.
Okay.
So he kind of based a lot of the set pieces around that. In fact, the rub and tug scene we shot it in the actual rub and tug where Jonas's actual experience actually happened.
Well, me and Jonas have a very shared experience.
Oh my God.
I was punked by a friend of mine. He asked me, "You ever been to a bathhouse?" I said, "No, I've never been to a bathhouse." He says, "Well, there's this bathhouse. You should go check it out. Sit down there, talk politics, talk life, sit there and have a sauna, go home." So I go in. And I'm completely clueless, right? I'm seeing the well-built naked men on the wall, the wall of sex toys. Like, I am so clueless into this. Long story short, I heard a lovely, passionate session going on in another room, and I thought somebody was being hurt. So I came running out of the sauna, and what I realized when I saw what I saw was a bunch of men and a bunch of women, and they were, very much in love with each other. Mm-hmm. I realized what was up, and I ran. And after that, I had a friend who was like, "I don't believe you. I don't believe this place exists." And she hounded me all night long. And it was like 11, 12 o'clock. We were leaving a bar. I was like, "Do you really want to go?" And she was like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Okay, I've been once." And I laid the groundwork, right? I was like, I've only been once. I was there for like half an hour. I left. I didn't do any of the things that you can do at these places. And we get in there. And the guy at the front counter goes, "Oh, hi, Michael. Nice to see you again." And she looks at me, and I was like, I don't know how this guy remembers my name. So, I mean, I get being in those awkward, that's why I'm like, this is not to get too personal, but it's clearly pulling from somewhere that he's experienced, and it's coming across the screen perfectly.
Yeah. Yes. And so yeah, in that one, he brought a lot of those experiences, and we reworked the script for years. I mean, originally, the basis of the story originally was a Jewish guy wanting to get involved with a non-Jewish woman, and his very Orthodox family being upset about that. And at the end of the story, he decided he should just marry a nice Jewish girl, and that was the end.
Oh, you never do what your parents tell you to do, unless they enroll you in film school.
There you go. Or maybe, who knows? Maybe there was a different history waiting for me that was more interesting.
Yeah,
You'll never know.
You'll never know.
But so that was Jonas's original script for that movie, and we. Basically, over years, we kind of passed drafts back and forth and worked as suggestor writer and kind of made it become what it was sort of in the end, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of his original experiences were based on stuff that he did. But I think aside from the rub and tug, that may be the only one that's actually
don't come. Don't come.
It may be the only scene left from his original kind of personal experience
as you chisel away and get down to the final draft.
Right. That may have been the only scene that actually survived. But that was sort of that one. Yes. Oh, and we never. Well, there's just not enough time in the day, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say we never talked about Zoe and Adam or Blood Pressure, which is my favorite of my films.
We are going to do a follow-up.
Yes, well,
because
very good.
It's worth it. So anyway, let's move to I Propose. We never see each other again after tonight. I love the title.
Thank you.
Did it take you a while to get to either making the longest title in movie history or not? Did you play around with a couple other names? Or
I did. I mean, I titles. I'm not very good at titles, and so I usually wait. We'll have a working title, but then I wait until the last possible minute before I actually sort of start announcing the film, or submitting to film festivals or talking to distributors. Like, I feel like once you've put it in an email and you've sent it out to somebody in the marketing world, then that's it. Then that's the name of the film.
That's the name of the film. So what is the film about for anybody who doesn't know?
Well, it is a rom-com, and it's very based in kind of Winnipeg iconography.
You start with pushing a car in the winter out of a snowbank.
That's right, a stranger's car.
Everybody in the movie theater that I was in loved it.
Oh, that's so great.
The hands, the clapping. There was so much, oh, yes. Oh, my God. Morden. It was perfect. But go on.
Yeah, I really, over the years, one collects ideas. I do anyway. And when I get an idea that I think is really a great idea for a scene or a character or whatever, I'll write it down and I'll kind of put it in a file somewhere. And then once in a while, you sort of organize those files. And I was growing for many years. I was growing a file of a Winnipeg movie, a Winnipeg rom-com, and I just kind of was waiting for the spine of the story to hit me that would allow me to go and access all of those ideas and see how many of them would sort of fit in this thing. And when I moved back from Toronto in 2017, because we lived there for a few years. And I moved back to Winnipeg, and I was overcome with kind of an affection for Winnipeg, as one is when one moves back, right? And I kind of thought, I feel like this is the moment to do this movie, but what would the story be? And I sort of thought it'll be a rom-com, and one of them has to be Mennonite, and one of them has to be Filipino, and it has to end at a wedding social. And so that was the inception of the idea.
And if anybody's ever been to a Filipino wedding social, it is the most joyous event.
They're so great.
It's so great. It's so much fun. The food is fucking fantastic. And Manitoba social. Right?
And I also feel like the Filipino wedding social is like the ultimate expression of multiculturalism gone right. You know, like when you look at the concept of multiculturalism in Canada and what that was meant to be and the promise that it held, I feel like, because they don't have wedding socials in the Philippines.
No.
Right? This is a Manitoba thing, but a Filipino wedding social, it's its own thing.
It is.
And it only exists in Winnipeg as a result of the Filipino community in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Taking something that was here and turning it into something of their own, but that is now all of ours.
Exactly. And now whenever a friend's like, yeah, my friend's getting wet, and you hear about it, you're like, I'm going. Like, I need tickets to this. I won't go to my friend's normal wedding social where they give away a Jets jersey and all that shit. I want to go to this one because it's a cultural uprising of so many things.
Yeah.
So, we're like, for anybody who wants to see this movie, what's the basic story of it?
I mean, it's the rom-com is a basic rom-com. They fall in love. We spend the first act with them kind of exploring their characters and seeing their backstories, and of course, our main guy's friend who is secretly in love with him, unbeknownst even to himself.
He was such a good buddy comedy character. Oh my god, the St. John's ambulance scene is so on point, man.
I'm so glad you thought that.
Oh my god, did you get an erection? What? It's not a big deal.
Well, I love the guy. Like, it's just because when you have kids, you get this all the time, right? Do you have an erection? The guy's like, no. It's like, what do you mean? It's standing right there. Yeah. Like, and raising a daughter, you get that with kids as well, right? Like there's the cookies are gone. They've got crumbs all over their shirt. Did you eat these cookies? No.
And there's like one still in their hand.
Totally.
Yeah. No.
They're like, maybe I'll get away with it.
I'll say anything. No, those little breaks. And the construction crew guys, like, as their construction not working, like, it's just, there was so much in it that you say rom-com, I see love story.
Sure.
I see a funny love story. I see a When Harry Met Sally. I don't see your traditional rom-com because it doesn't oversaturate the romantic side of it. It is I went and saw it with a buddy of mine, and all like the first meet cute is great, right? The pushing of the stranger's car out of a snowbank. But and I'm sorry, I'm horrible with memory here, but so we have
Iris and Simon, the two.
Iris and Simon, thank you. I was going with their actual human names, but Iris and Simon, yes. So Iris and Simon, when they meet for the second time in the Linland Grocery, and then it was like, oh, hey, Winnipeg, small city or whatever, right? But when she leaves and he texts, is it too soon to text you? I actually had a tear come down my eye. I was like, it's coming down my eye again right now. My wife, I met, and I called her 9 hours after I met her, because I don't believe in the 2, 3, 4 day rule.
Right.
So those are the things that, as much as it is a traditional, by standards, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes rom-com, it is a real life love story with tragedy and loss and banana sauce, like you said. It's banana sauce. No, it's ketchup. It's banana sauce. No, it's ketchup.
And it is ketchup. Have you had it? It's
is it ketchup?
It just tastes like ketchup.
Really?
But they use bananas instead of sugar.
That's so funny.
Pretty much tastes like ketchup. A little different, but pretty much.
And having, like, I believe Winnipeg is the biggest transplant of Filipinos outside of the Philippines.
I'm not sure about that. I know within Canada they are the largest population per capita. So 1 out of every 10 Winnipeggers
is Filipino.
Claims Filipino heritage. There are more, like in actual numbers, there are more in Toronto and there are more in Vancouver. But of course, larger population, so a smaller percentage. In Vancouver, there's still 6% of Vancouver is Filipino.
Yeah,
which is still huge.
Yeah,
right. And in Vancouver and in Toronto, I think it's 5% or 4% or something. It's
still
also
huge,
very big.
4 million in the GTA.
Yeah.
Right?
So I mean, it's the thing about the Filipino population that I hadn't really noticed until I was finishing this film up is that they are really very present everywhere in Canada. They tend to be like a really essential piece of the cultural fabric wherever they live. Like Winnipeg without Filipinos is not Winnipeg.
Nope, it's
right. I mean, that's and yet, where's the other movie aside from mine with Filipino characters in it, or the other TV show, or there is none.
No.
And you're like, wait a minute. Well, how did Winnipeg make movies for 20 years and not have any Filipino characters in them? That's kind of crazy. And I'm as guilty as anyone else. I made 7 movies here before this one, and I cast Alan Castanaga in one, and I've cast 1 or 2, and I've worked with Stephanie Sy on stuff. But I don't is 1 out of every 10 characters that I've put in a movie been Filipino since? No, absolutely not. And so it feels like, I think in the Free Press, Randall described it as this this kind of treasure hiding in plain sight.
Very much. That's a great description of it. The lack of subtitles. I wanted to ask you about that. Now, my guess is this is what it's like to be in a home where you don't understand the language. And this is how it really is, as opposed to making it understandable across the room, which I appreciated, because I was like, okay, this is breaking a barrier, right? It's teaching you that meeting a new family, meeting a new culture, learning about them as the audience, you might not understand everything, but I still understood everything.
That you see, that's
Did I get it?
Of course.
Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think you grow up in Canada, and everybody either comes from a house with 2 languages or has a friend whose house is 2 languages, and you go to their friend's house and mom and dad are speaking in a mix of English and whatever the language is, Hungarian or Spanish or whatever.
Yeah.
And the kids are usually responding in English to their parents.
Yes.
And you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I get what's going on. Like, I totally,
there's enough here.
Yeah, there's enough for me to understand what's going on through the facial gestures and the tone, the voice, and everything else. And even though I don't understand every word, I get it.
Iris getting shit from the patriarch, the mother, who she was fantastic.
She's amazing.
And I know that because I do have friends from other backgrounds and other cultures, and family's just not a thing for white Canadians. Like, we have it, but we don't have it where it's so rooted in our community and our weekends and everything that we do. Like. And you drive through a park on a Sunday, you'll see 50 people. They're all Filipinos. They're having the best time of their fucking life. My family has never done that, ever. 50 of us getting together on repetitively, and it's so buried. So watching the mother and Iris fight back and forth about how she's kind of stepping out on the family, so to speak, because it's not within. And she obviously married a Filipino boy originally to make mom and dad happy. There's a lot of other things that aren't in a normal rom-com.
Sure. And I think, the relationship between the mom and Iris was something that we worked a lot on with both actors, Mithus and Hera. And a mom because I really love the idea of not a mom who's angry, or a mom who is, angry at her for somehow breaking out of the culture. Because I don't think that's really a thing in Winnipeg. I'm sure it's a thing for somebody somewhere in Winnipeg. Yeah. But I mean, generally, I don't think that's a thing. And so we worked on this thing, which you kind of get at the end of the movie, I think, where the mom's issue is that she let her daughter do whatever she wanted because she thought that was the best path forward. And her daughter made a big mistake when she was 19, and she saw her daughter making the mistake and didn't stop her.
Okay.
Right. And then the daughter got really badly hurt by it. And the mom is just like, I'm not going to let that happen again.
Okay. I did miss that. I just saw On the Skin.
Right.
And I loved it because it made for Iris standing up for herself and being like, no, mom, this is my life, right? This is my choice. And what I loved is I looked at Simon's, I looked at Iris's page. They don't have a lot of, where did you find them?
No,
they're amazing.
They're great actors. I was so lucky. Hera Simon, I just auditioned actors, and we had a number of actors who would have been really good in that role. Christian struck me as the best. I was down to 3, and actually I'd already cast Hera as Iris, and so I was down to 3, and I couldn't decide which of the 3 I liked best. They were very different from one another, so they would have been very different Simons, but they're all very, very good.
Okay.
And so I brought Hera in, and we did an audition with Hera playing off each of the Simons.
Okay.
And at the end, so I was able to see Hera together with the person who would be the romantic male lead. And after they'd all left, I kept Hera back, and I was like, so which one did you like?
Who's your suitor?
Yeah. And she was so petrified of losing somebody a gig. She was like, oh, they're all good. And I was like, yeah, but you must have liked one better than the other. She was like, no, they're all the same. They're, each one of them is their own thing. And I pushed her and pushed her and pushed her until there was one moment where she said, there was that moment when Christian turned around and looked at me with his blue eyes, and I just felt my heart stop. And I was like, Christian it is. Christian is the boy. And so, but Hera herself, we had, I went to casting directors in the city and said, okay, I have a film with 29 characters. 20 of them are Filipino. So I'm looking for 20 Filipino actors, which means I want to see 60 to 80 people at least.
Yeah, you
right?
need a good sample size.
To get, And all these casting directors, great people, good friends of mine, working very, very hard. But just the way that things go in this city, they were like, I have 5. And I was like, okay, well, that's
I read
not
that in the CBC article.
Yeah, that's not going to cut it, right? Like, how am I going to? So I started digging and talking to people, talking to the Filipino actors that I did know and Filipino friends of mine who work in the industry, and just sort of saying, who do you know that is a good actor? Not necessarily acting as a profession, maybe, but just like a good actor.
Who's got some personality? Who's got some character?
And I just started bringing people in. And one thing about the Filipino community in Winnipeg that I love is other places that I've been, India, Japan, wherever else, you go to even just take a picture of people and they're like, oh, no. But the Filipino community, I'd be like, okay, hi, I'm a filmmaker. And the first thing is like, can I be in your movie? Like right off the bat.
Super enthusiastic.
I love it.
Work, yeah.
Yeah. So I, it was very easy to get people who were interested in being in it. And we brought in, again, we ended up looking at 60 to 80 people. But I found them. They were everywhere. I worked so hard to find them.
Mom and dad are perfect.
Yep. As MCs, you hire them together. They do karaoke.
They're playing off each
yep.
other.
I was up at Seafood World the other day, and Mom was calling bingo there.
Really?
Oh yeah. That's they're like, you have an event in the Filipino community. You need some MCs. These are
love that place.
People that you call, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah, I love that place too.
It's like Langanese sausage for.
Oh yes.
Like just a cooler full of it.
I'm going to tell you a story about them in a minute that you're going to love.
Okay.
But Hera comes in and auditions for a day part. She auditioned for the part of the daughter in Morden.
Yes. Okay.
Very small part.
You're from Winnipeg?
Yeah.
You look lost.
You look lost. Are you from Winnipeg? Are you Filipino? And so the daughter. So that was the part she came and auditioned for. She came in her first audition. You see it. What you see in the film.
See it.
Yeah. What you see in the film is what I saw in that room.
Charming,
I was like, I need this woman to be my lead.
Yeah.
But I was like, but am I sure? So I kept her. I said, let me play you off somebody else. You stay. I'm going to bring in another actor, and you're going to play off of them. And then we're going to bring in another actor, and you're going to play off. And we kept her in the room for half an hour, auditioning her. And when she left, I was sad to see her go. Like I enjoyed watching her, and I was sad to see her leave. And I turned to my casting director and my co-producer, Nick Christie, and I was like, I'm like sad to see her go. And they said, me too. I like really am sad to see. Like I loved watching her now.
I was enamored. I couldn't.
Yeah. So I left my chair. I ran out of the casting room, and I managed to grab her before she left the building. And I said, "Would you be interested in being the lead in this? You came out and auditioned for this really small part." And you may have read this already, but she said, "Actually, I'm going to play."
Yes.
So there's a conflict. I can't actually be the lead in your movie. I'm really sorry. And then she walked out, and I was like, but no,
I'm not done with you.
Yeah, but no, because you are the movie.
Yeah.
Like I just saw it in that room. It's you. You are the movie. So I called her and I was like, hey, I just kind of sprung that on you when you were leaving the room. Very unfair of me. Listen, I know you're going to play. Have you started yet? And she's like, no. Have you started rehearsals yet? Nope. Could I convince you to leave that play? I was like, because this is like a movie and you're going to be the lead. And it's going to be on TV. It's going to be in theaters. And I'm sure they could find someone else to replace you in the play. And she's like, I'm the lead. I'm like, well, that'd be even easier to replace you in the play. Who wouldn't take that? She's like, no, I promised them. I'm really sorry. I love like she did think about it. I almost got her at one point, but she was like, no, I signed a contract. I promised them.
That's incredibly solid of her.
Yeah, very solid of her.
Yeah.
She's like, maybe if you could shoot around me on weekends or something, but otherwise I can't do it. And I was like, damn. And so I left it a couple days more, and then I called her back again, and I was like, how about this? What if, I get it that in Winnipeg, if you're an actor and you walk away from theater to do film, that's a black mark on you. Yeah. It's hard to get work again after that. So what if I called them first? Because I know them all at the theater. Where I know all those guys. In fact, one of them used to go out with my sister. It's Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I was like, what if I called them and said, I have an actor that I want to cast. She's in your upcoming show. And sweet talk them. And if they said, that's fine, that's great, we wouldn't hold it against her.
Get their blessing.
Yeah, get their blessing. Then would you do the movie? She's like, let me think about it. I was like, okay, think about it. And I waited a day. And she called me back the next day and she said, I thought about it. No, I won't. No. I promised them. I promised them I'd be in the play, so I'm going to do the play. So I turned to my crew and I was like, guys, could we shoot weekends? Like, would that work? And the crew, to my great and eternal gratitude, said, yeah, Sean, we've been working nonstop on all these American shows and TV movies. We don't see our families anymore. The idea that we could
5 days of family time.
5 days of family time and 2 days of work, that would actually right now be perfect for us. So we shot on weekends to shoot around Hera's schedule because I was not letting her be in the movie.
If she never wants to act again, she should be a negotiator. Like, seriously.
So one of the things that is kind of a benefit, I think, of that is that you see the season change.
You do.
Over the course, because we shot it chronologically. So we start in the darkest heart of January.
Yeah.
And the movie ends, like the last scene we shot, I think, April 27th. And so you really see that change in Winnipeg that is so kind of marvelous, really. It's one world to another world.
It's a rebirth of snow and death and cold.
And seeing as the film deals also with secrets and revealing things and uncovering things,
I get it.
And Simon, in a sense, melting away. I mean, there's, I think, a lot of metaphoric value to it ultimately, which was just kind of a bonus of shooting around Hera's schedule. But yeah, that's where I found Hera and Simon. I take my casting very seriously. I read once that it's the most important decision that a director ever makes, and
I don't see how it couldn't be.
I don't disagree with that. So yeah, we spent a long time casting, but I'm very pleased with the cast we ended up with.
Oh, they're fantastic. So there is one scene that I had to take some issue with, and I'm going to call you out on it, but it's funny. The blind dates that she went on, and I love the technology aspect where you literally swipe and the guy leaves the seat. But the first one's a podcaster. We're not all douchebags, Sean.
But he wasn't a podcaster.
I know
he was a wannabe podcaster.
Okay, you're right. But my buddy just looked over at me and he fell out of the chair laughing. I felt this big in the thing because podcasting's the new thing, right? Like it's riding a wave. So whenever I see it in a movie or something, I was like, okay, we've got to bring this up. But what I really wanted to know was the premise for their first date. Mm-hmm. That is something that, because first you talk about a lot of things in that first date scene, admitting things about yourself too much, too soon, too fast. These are the three things that all humans worry about in a world of dating. So there's a romantic in you that obviously exists somewhere to see these things or to have gone through them. So where did the idea come from for let's just put it out all on the table? Like, is there something there, or were you just trying to mess with the traditional ways of dating?
That scene, the first scene where she basically says, "Listen, in the title of the film, I propose we never see each other again after tonight, so we can just tell each other whatever secrets we want, and then we walk out into the snow and we'll never see each other again." Yeah. Came from an experience that I had.
Okay.
I used to live in Argentina, as we discussed. Yeah. And one day I was in a bank changing some dollars to Australes, which was the currency at the time. And
you have to say that every time you give change?
Australes, yeah.
You have 4 Australes.
I met this Canadian couple from Vancouver, and we just got talking while we were waiting in line, and they were backpacking, and I was living there in Buenos Aires, and they sort of said, we got talking about stuff, and I was, I'm in film school here, and I'm connected with all these young artists, and they said, oh, that would be so cool. And I said, well, there's a party tonight. Like, I'm going to a party with a bunch of Argentinian artists. It's going to be kind of cool. And they were like, oh, could we tag along? And I was like, sure, that'd be fun. That'd be great. Why don't you tag along? Let's meet in front of the old opera house at this time. It's Argentina, so parties start at 1 a.m. Yep. So I was like, let's meet in front of the old opera house at 11.
We don't know how to party here. we close the bar when they open the party.
That's right. I was like, let's meet in front of the old opera house at 11. Have a coffee, whatever, some beers, and then we'll go to this party. So at 11, she shows up with no boyfriend. And she sits down and she's like, yeah, he's actually my fiance, and he has this stomach issue sometimes and so he, so he kicked up with him and he couldn't come out. He wanted me to go out and have fun. And so, so she sat down and she started talking about the boyfriend, and she said, I got to tell you, I'm actually, even though we're engaged to be married, I'm having an affair. And I was like, really? Wow. And she was like, yeah. And she felt she could tell me because
She doesn't know you.
I'm some guy from Winnipeg living in Argentina. She's from Vancouver. Like, when are we ever going to see each other again?
Totally,
right?
yeah.
So she started spilling, and I was like, I got to tell you something. And we closed that cafe down. Basically, at 4:00 in the morning, we were still sitting there. We never went to the party. We just spent all night telling each other.
I love that that's rooted in that.
Yeah. And that was one of those things that went into my idea file of like, someday I got to put that into a movie, because I think it was just such a magical moment. I think if I ever actually ran into her, I'd be terrified.
Yeah, you'd be Simon, right?
Totally.
Because he even says in the grocery store when they meet again, he was like, was that too much? Like, how do you come back from that? But it is essentially the best way to start any relationship, right? Like, just put it all out there. But we're so reserved and we're so scared of rejection and all that stuff that it has to be a perfect stranger. Otherwise, too much, too fast, too soon.
Yeah, and I hope that in a certain sense it also sets up, and just in terms of the structure of the comedy.
Yeah,
here are the obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. They kind of explain to each other basically before the game starts.
Yeah,
like
I leave randomly, and then he leaves randomly with, and as soon as I saw him, and these are the things that my brain picks up on, putting on his robe and being in such a distressed state. Is that what you were trying to show? Is that he doesn't have a single clue of what's happening? I just need to go. So a robe and socks is all I need.
Yeah, and out he goes. Yeah,
and the flashback to her sitting at the door saying please, like begging for him to come back, and you don't know he's out there, and then it cuts to her the rest of her day and how it affects her. She goes to Morden, she pines after him. I hope I'm not ruining this for too many people. Go see it either way. It'll fucking rock you. It'll bury itself in your heart and it won't leave. But and then it flashes right back to Simon being outside. I thought that was a really interesting way to cut and show both stories. Is that how do ideas like that?
Well, it's one of the things that I enjoyed with this film is that it is a rom-com, but
love story. I'm going to argue that.
Okay, that's great, because I don't color inside the genre lines very often.
Yeah.
I'm just not very good at it. So, I mean, I'm a Winnipegger. I come from this kind of experimental petri dish of films that we do here.
Yeah.
And I bring that to the rom-com. Like, okay, what happens if we just jump backwards in time to explain a different thing that happened and have parallel timelines? Like, the audience will get it.
Yeah, it totally comes across very easy, because it's not like a Nolan movie where it's 50 of those.
No.
Right? It's one quick, easy cut, and it cuts away. And one thing I want to say before I have to let you go is the realism of the love is great. The big gesture at the social, as soon as she says, I've never seen somebody with a stand-up bass before. And I looked at my buddy Jason, I went, that bass is coming back. And now that I know you're a bass player, I totally get it. And I was like, every rom-com is always so over the top with the gesture and the final, like, this is me, Jerry Maguire bullshit. Sure. And you're like, nobody has the funds, the time, the effort, the idea, the wherewithal, whatever you want to call it, to get that done. This is a guy who's like, I just need to play bass.
Two notes
on
top of that.
I just need to play 2 notes at a social and show that I'm willing to do this. And I was like, that is the perfect gesture. So back to it, which you didn't answer. Where does this romantic in you come from? Because even if it's in the kooky, in Borealis, even if it's in the sexual aspect of My Sexual Adventure, and even if it's with this, where it is, like you say, a love story, like there's something there that just, and I think as a filmmaker, you have to be a romantic, not in the love sense, but just in the grand gesture of it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I've never had that question before. I mean, I guess if I think about it, I mean, I like to believe in the redemptive power of romantic love. I do. Okay. I think that there's something there, corny as that sounds.
Nope, that's
that
not.
That you can lose yourself in your lover's arms, and for a second everything's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's at the end of the day, that's what everybody really genuinely wants. Yeah,
and so I mean, I think in a lot of those examples that you just pointed out, I indulge myself giving the audience that moment, right?
Oh, it's the one thing I was like, running theme. I see this here. When is it playing till, and where can people find it if it's not in theaters? Is there going to be a place where they can find it eventually, or is that?
Yes. I mean, because podcasts live forever, I guess. So,
yes.
So we're recording this in August, the end of August of 2020 on planet Earth.
Yep. I think so.
Yes. And it's playing in Winnipeg. It got extended by a week
Yep.
because it did very well in week 1. So we're playing until September 3rd.
Okay.
And then if people manage to go out this weekend, it'll play for another week. It's not like we have much competition at the moment, which is great.
Go fucking see it. The theaters are safe. I was in one. I brought my mask. I was ready to be a little anxious, but it was an incredible environment. It's not dangerous to be in. I mean, I know today 55 cases, yesterday 32. It's not. Don't let that stop you from seeing a fantastic movie in the way it's supposed to be seen, which is in a movie theater.
It opens September 4th in Toronto on 2 screens and in Vancouver on 2 screens. And then Edmonton the week after that and Calgary. And we're just kind of looking at it sort of no further ahead than that. I mean, my idea is to play it in as many places as I can.
Yeah.
There's some really interesting... During the pandemic, there's some really interesting upside down world stuff going on, not just for everybody on the world, but also in theaters.
Yeah.
Where normally Canadian films can't get a screen ever, right?
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, normally we can never get a screen for our films.
Sorry,
right?
sorry, Avengers. Sorry,
Yeah.
Harry Potter.
You know,
sorry, yeah.
So usually we end up playing like you play in Winnipeg, you play the Grant Park or the Cinematheque or the small screen that you can find for yourself.
Yeah.
But during the pandemic, they've been playing, reruns of Pluto Nash from a DVD or something.
I know.
So and those are not making much money for them.
No.
And so, you bring a Canadian film, you do some marketing and you bring some people in and they're like, oh, that's making more money than our other stuff. So we'll keep it. And not only will we keep it, could we play it in some of our other theaters,
Exactly.
right? And so that's where we have an interesting little opportunity to get it out in theaters right now. And an interesting opportunity to play it in more than one theater, which never happens. 20 years, 8 feature films. I have never opened on more than one screen.
Congratulations.
Per city. But because it's the pandemic, I mean, I said to Mongrel Media, my distributor, I was like, could we open on 2 screens in Winnipeg? And he was like, that never happens. I'm like, yeah, I know it never happens, but could we?
There's nothing there, man.
Could you ask Cineplex? I mean, the worst they can say is no. And he was like, I'm going to ask them, but they're going to say no. And he called me back and he was like, okay, you're on 2 screens.
That's awesome.
And so now I'm trying to push him for 4 screens in Toronto. We'll see.
We have listeners all across Canada. So wherever this is going to play for you, there's somebody somewhere. So if you're in Edmonton or Toronto or Vancouver, I implore you to go see a fantastic movie about our hometown, about love in our hometown, about loss and banana sauce and everything that I was like, that's a catchy article, CBC. Way to go. But it's Hannah and Christian.
Hera and Christian.
Sorry. That toque. Who came up with that toque she was wearing?
She has it. She
has
owns it. A friend of hers made it.
That's even more why she needed to be in it. And the hips. Sorry, one more thing. The hipster element with Simon. Whose was that? Was that you?
Which hipster element?
The boots, the short tight jeans, like just
oh yeah,
like a Mennonite. My best friend is Mennonite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't raised strict, but when you think about coming from a small town like Morden or Winkler in the Mennonite belt, they don't come across as your traditional hipster guy. So when
that's I think what they want to be though when they come to the city, right? Like they, and there is this sense of in Winnipeg we're so spoiled in a sense because we get the inside scoop on Mennonites,
yes,
right? Because we are so tight with that community. And you talk to people in Toronto or Vancouver and say, my guy's a Mennonite, and right away they're seeing a guy on an ox cart with a suit, and and it's like this, and so a big part of it for us was showing this downtown hipster, right, who wants to be a jazz bass player, and he's a Mennonite. It sounds like most of the Mennonites I grew up with.
Yeah, no, it plays, it works, it's based in reality. It's not a stretch. I love that it wasn't your prototypical, right? So it gave the character more likability. It gave him a little bit more depth instead of like watching him fade from like that's like Kingpin with Bill Murray, right? Where like he's the traditional Mennonite or Pennsylvania Dutch, and
right.
It's
Amish.
funny,
yeah.
but it's not believable,
right?
So
yeah,
Sean, this has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, likewise.
Is there anything you want to share about what people can look forward to from you? Anything you want to promote?
No other stuff coming up. I mean, the main thing is, I propose we never see each other again after tonight is going to be in theaters throughout the fall. November, we come out on VOD, every kind of VOD. And then after that, we're on Crave.
Great.
And we'll see where it sort of goes from there. But yeah, I mean, it'll be in theaters for the fall, and then it will live in
infamy.
Well, wherever it'll live out in the cyber world forever.
It'll live in infamy for me, man. Like I will buy it. I will own it. I will tell the world to fucking watch it.
Oh, thanks, man.
Definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of The Reel Debaters. If you are unfamiliar with us and this is your first time, you can find us everywhere on social media. It's at Reel Debaters, REEL is the spelling because we're cheeky like that. If you want to email us, you can, thereeldebaters@gmail.com. Keep that email handy because we're going to start reading some of these emails online from people's opinions of our show and the debates we have. I have been Michael Petrow. My guest has been
Sean Garrity.
And we are gone.